Cougs house. Yes, it could have been prettier, but Conner Weigman and company and the new look Cougars all put together are 1-0 in their first shutout opener in over 35 years.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs at this point your post-game destination. I was going to say first listen of the day as the everyday you are. You know, that's the typical spiel here, but not quite. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. We got more on that and the ways to get into tickets to these great Houston Cougar games. It seems like going to be a few of them over the course of the season. All that's later. But QB1, Conner Weigman, 1-0 in Houston Cougar red. Got to celebrate that in the first segment. So we're going to spend some time on that. I also want to talk some about the defense, the DBs, because I think that was a big concern in the offseason. And frankly, it did not feel like a concern over the course of Thursday night. And last but not least, I kind of want to take a did you get what you need feel from this one. So if you're listening in the car on the way home, on your cell phone, whatever, if you're just at your desktop at home needing some Houston Cougar football talk, send it to your buddies and let's get in this chat and let's get things rolling in that last segment. But first, Conner Weigman. Look, it wasn't pretty at all moments. It wasn't perfect. It was very much a preseason feel. And I say that because in college football, there are no preseason games or practices against another school or whatever, like you see in the NFL, where they're like, frankly, practicing hard against one another in the week, and then preseason gaming and those kinds of like dress rehearsals and walkthroughs and all that. College football's got none of that. This felt like that in a lot of ways, right? I did love opening the game with the deep shot over the top to Kobe Young. Look, I wanted to see Kobe catch one tonight. He did not come up with a catch. Kobe is a tremendous athlete and receiver. He very clearly has asserted himself as the deep threat guy that took a couple shots to him over the course of the game. Didn't come down with one, but Weigman had plenty of other things. Going deep over the top to start the game, though, to me indicates like a let's get this party rolling kind of vibe out of Nagel and Weigman. And while it didn't quite click, and there were several other things that didn't click over the night, I thought it was a good move, a good indicator on where we're at right now. I liked how much they ran Conner Weigman both on purpose and not so much on purpose. It was good to see that. If you studied Weigman when he committed, he was like that in high school. And with injury concerns, I think A&M had kind of opted to not do that as much. Houston, I think, thinks of it as an asset and a weapon. I would also point out that if he does break a shoelace and need to sit for a second, Zion Chris won a handful of Big 12 games last season. You feel like you can get through a little bit of time while you fix that shoelace or whatever the case may be, right? So I really liked using him in that way. As far as running the ball goes, Weigman was 6 carries for 39 yards, only was sacked one time. A lot of movement out of him, including the big, I think it was 27 yards what I got down in my notes here from his scramble on a bad snap. First touchdown pass, admittedly, was like a defensive error. They motioned Tanner Kozel, big tight end, who had 7 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. Have not seen more on him, but he was walking around with a knee brace on, but a very like normal knee brace, the normal walking gait, even after the initial, like, we'll talk about him later. But Kozel motions across. They don't carry him out on the motion, wide open for a touchdown. I understand people saying like they're playing an FCS school and that's a defensive let up touchdown, but Kozel's like unique matchup is going to impact things like that because they're going to have been told not to switch certain things or carry over certain things because they don't want to put him on a 5'8" corner or something, right? And that will mess teams up because it breaks their rules to try and keep up with them. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that. On the whole, though, the best ball he threw of the night was by far the third touchdown pass to Amari Thomas. Amari Thomas had just 3 catches, but it did feel like he and Weigman have some sort of chemistry. It was able to put the ball exactly where it was supposed to be, and Amari Thomas came up with the ball exactly in his hands. All 3 of those times were not easy throws, and I really felt like in the course of this, honestly, I felt like that Amari Thomas probably should have gotten more targets, or frankly should have gotten more looks across the board here. He was able to run. I mentioned that. He's able to improvise. I mentioned that. He got 1 big touchdown pass hitting Jamarian Burnett in the flat. Fat in the flat was a great play for Houston in this one. I can't complain about 15 to 24, 159 yards, 3 interceptions, 1 near pick that wasn't, but also 1 near pick that shouldn't have been. So kind of a wash to me there. Honestly, so much more offensive production from the quarterback spot, than which is a spot that gets the stats for a lot of players playing well together, admittedly, but a great quarterback outing relative to what about 2 since Clayton Tune left. Let's just be honest, since Clayton Tune left of Houston Cougar football, I think that when you see things continue to gel more, both Nagel and Weigman gelling more, Weigman and the receivers gelling more, you're going to see things continue to unfold in a positive manner. I mentioned Tanner Gazelle had 7 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. That Again, he played about a half. He got tackled in the legs one time and kind of sat on the turf for a minute, and it took him a while to get off the ground. People were worried. He came back in for a play, and then we got tackled. He had trouble getting up off the ground then as well after hitting his leg when he got up off the ground. He was walking in a knee brace fine. He ran his route on the play he came back in fine. I imagine we'll hear more about it over the course of the week. I imagine, frankly, though, if they've been as tight-lipped as they were about like Rashawn Stanford not being able to suit up tonight, I'm imagining they'll probably also be tight-lipped about him going forward, especially before they get to a Big 12 game where they don't have to put out an injury report, right? Now, he was very impactful, and I saw people saying they should get him the ball more. And in what was basically a half of football, he had 7 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. If he played 2 halves at the same rate against an opponent that was like making them play their starters the whole time, that's 14 catches for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's incredible for a tight end. Given the circumstances, I think it's fair to say Cozell is target number 1 and got treated like so. I mentioned I wish Kobe had caught a couple of the deep balls that were thrown his way, both for his sake and Houston's, frankly. Obviously, it's nice to get those yards and accumulate those points and whatever. But also, I think that Kobe Young is a featured receiver in this offense. We didn't see Stephon Boogie Johnson get a whole lot of that kind of stuff either. I think Stephen F. Austin seemed kind of content to, low and high him and keep him out of things and opened other guys up a little bit. Frankly, opened up the middle for running stuff a little bit more. And then once Houston got a sizable lead, they were content just handing the ball off in this game. So you kind of saw the pass game dip because of that as well. Houston had 191 yards on the ground, right at 4.2 a carry. That's impressive enough to not need to do much else. Every third run's a first down, right? Like that. Why do anything else? The thing that did surprise me about the offense, and we'll talk more about the got what you need moment in the third segment, where I'll take questions and comments in the chat, as well as talk about did we get what we need out of this one. Houston committed 8 penalties for 65 yards, and that is not Fritz-like. Now, Houston had trouble with penalties last year. I mean, say that it's never happened under Fritz, but he has preached since he stepped on campus to cancel and get rid of those kinds of things, mental error, the false starts, and those kinds of stuff. And it did not feel like they went away. That's one complaint I had. Now, admittedly, some of the false starting and bad snapping could also be the offense, kind of finding its groove, so to speak. But that will be more, I guess, as we see Rice and Colorado and so on. So we'll see that as we go. One thing we did see on Thursday night in the second segment, I want to get into what the DBs and how the replacement product in the back was as we've replaced some, names from last year. And frankly, I'm kind of excited about the guys who got back there after watching them play some. So we'll talk about them in 1 second. But first, I mentioned at the top that today's show was brought to you by Game Time, because as we're sitting here at the post game, college football is back. And it's easy to get excited. Tailgates, rivalries, energy in stands. They kept selling out of student tickets. At over 28,000 people there on a Thursday night for an FCS opponent at TDCU. There's just nothing like it. And if we're being real, the only challenge is actually getting the tickets. It can be more of a battle than the game itself sometimes. That's why I use Game Time. That's why Locked On promotes. I mean, Game Time is the place to go for this. Is the best place to get into the action. Advantage goes back to the fans. You get to know exactly what you're paying when you toggle the switch over. No surprise fees. You know exactly what the view is going to be like from your seat. No surprises there. Deals as you get closer to kickoff, so make sure you're getting the best price possible, even if it's last minute. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Promo code Locked On College, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here, talking about Houston, talking about shutting out Stephen F. Austin in the home opener. Conner Weigman is 1-0 as your Houston Cougars starting quarterback. But I want to talk some about the defense as well, because they pitched that shutout, the first shutout, as we mentioned in the cold open, that the Houston Cougars have had in an opening game since 1988 and 89. And I want to point out, first of all, that that's before I was alive. So I'll take your word for it, internet. But I would also point out that that is, frankly, back in like glory days. That's Andre Ware. That's Klingler. That's peak Houston Cougar football to a lot of folks. More of the Case Keenum vintage. But I will say that defensively, you saw a lot of the same kind of aggression you saw last year, which I think is encouraging. The defense had a lot of change. A couple key defensive backs left. Defensive coordinator changed. It wasn't by your choice necessarily. You send off Keith Cooper to the NFL. You're like, okay, wait a second. What are we doing up front? And Houston answered, I thought, a lot of those questions. Now, obviously, much like we mentioned the offense, this is a preseason feeling kind of game. But Jalen Garner came in and started at linebacker, led the team with 6 tackles. 5 of those were on his own. Kentrell Webb, I thought, showed tremendous growth at one of the safety spots. He was playing back there with A.J. Halsey last year and felt kind of like of 5 good DBs. He was on the weaker of the 5. And I mean, it was 5 good DBs, but we had questions there. He came in and played phenomenally, I thought, and it was in the right place, the right time. A couple big hits. Speaking of big hits, folks, I mean, that Latreveon McCutchin hit. So if you missed the game, if you weren't paying attention to the play happened, or you just heard everyone go, ooh, at some point, there was a swing pass out into the flat. It might have been a flat pass. I don't remember the pattern necessarily. I just remember the hit more importantly. But Latreveon McCutchin drops from his jack position, the hybrid defensive end linebacker spot they've got him at. And he'd made a few big plays at this point. He was probably feeling himself a little bit. But it was Stephen Austin wheeled back and threw it. Vidlac let that thing go. And Latreveon broke downhill on it, perfectly timed. And the ball's like a little bit behind the Stephen Austin running back receiver type, his back hip. And before he can turn around with the ball in his hands, Latreveon with a perfectly legal hit, as soon as the guy's head is right back facing him, puts the shoulder through the rib cage with the kind of whiplash that legitimately whipped the guy's helmet off. It looked like a decapitation happening out there on the football field. And while we're talking about DBs in this segment, and that's really more Latrell McCutchin, obviously, Latreveon McCutchin, man, oh man, hit of the night. That name needs to be on SportsCenter top 10. I'm going to be upset if that's not on SportsCenter top 10. That's how I'm going to find a way to be upset about this. I'm going to be upset about that. I will say other DBs, I thought Latrell did his thing. I was worried about one of the receivers at Stephen Boston, Kylan Harris, pro potential kind of guy, a kind of like, is he slept on kind of guy. Houston did their job on that one, kind of kept him in check. Kylan Harris did have 4 catches for 20 yards, but for him, that's actually pretty mundane, if not bad. He's typically a guy that gets close to 100 per game. And so Houston did a really good job of keeping him under wraps. across the board here, I think that other DBs that played well, Will James seemed to be around the ball whenever it was out and about. I feel like that was worth pointing out because he was a guy that came in maybe a little bit lesser known in the transfer portal last year. Rook Brown had a nice sack, but also had a couple big defensive back, more traditional plays, breakups, coverages that, runs guy off the ball, runs guy away from the ball when it's in the air, those kinds of things. Really, really impressed by him. Comika Glass, I guess, is not quite your traditional DB type, but he had a couple nice plays as well. On the whole, and I know that they're playing an FCS school and they got to play Rice next week and the Big 12 the week after, and this thing ramps up in a hurry. But I think we understand that this defense is at least going to be aggressive when it matters. And last year, the defense was aggressive because they kind of had to take their chances there. That's where the talent was, and they had to be aggressive last year to kind of give themselves chances. That's how they beat Kansas State. That's how they beat Utah. Frankly, that's how they beat TCU, even though TCU also was not ready for Zion Chris. That's how they won games, was being aggressive on defense and taking advantage of teams that couldn't put the ball in the end zone, right? And honestly, this felt like that, admittedly, against an FCS opponent, did feel like that as well, right? They were blitzing on third down, sending guys from different angles. Right after the Rook Brown sack, you then followed up with a Mac sack. Mac sack, that's fun to say. And that's big too. Big to have him back on the field. But Brandon Mack, I guess, the Ole Miss transfer came in a couple years ago at this point, but really good to see him back out there making some havoc across the board. Other things I'll point out here that I thought were interesting on the defensive side of the ball, where the offense, which we'll talk about in the third segment more, because we talked about in the first segment, we'll come back to in the third, because that seems to be where the commentary here is in the comment section. The offense itself, I do think, was vanilla. The defense up front did not feel vanilla. The coverages probably were a lot of one high, a lot of three, a lot of man underneath all that, right? And so they're not showing off too much back there, especially when you consider, like, you go back and watch some Austin Armstrong stuff at Florida or Southern Miss. He can get really complex in the back half. Did not need that in this one, so you did not see that in this one. As far as the front seven goes, Carlos Allen looked like Carlos Allen does. He was involved in pass rush stuff more than he typically is, but I would point out that Carlos Allen ranked as one of the top defensive interior linemen in run defense last year, and he looks the part again. That's an important part what Houston's going to do in this multifaceted front, and Carlos Allen did his thing. Khalil Lofo, welcome to Houston. Transfer out of Washington State. He's only credited with a couple tackles here, but I'm thinking like he had a pass, I would say breakup, was really more of a beat down from the defensive line spot. He 8 blocks. He chased quarterbacks. Big fella, transfer in from Washington State. He did a little bit of a lot of things to help Houston in this one. So pretty fun game out of him there. CJ Douglas got in with the pick there at the end. So you'd see that name on the field. He hadn't gotten to see him a whole lot. Rashad Sterling got in on the pass rush. A lot of names in this one, and obviously part of that, you're up 27-0 on an FCS opponent. But part of that, I think, is also like we're going to see a lot of names through this game and Rice. Maybe not Colorado because it does factor in Big 12 standings, but then Oregon State after that, I think you'll see more rotation as well, all leading up to figuring out who fits where. And then some of these freshmen, if they play those 4 games, might sit the rest of the year after that if they're going to take their red shirt or whatever because the new rules as a couple of years ago. So pay attention to who's in, who's out in those rotations, even if they're not accumulating stats necessarily. Miles Parker, big defensive tackle. I think he's listed like 330. He came through and cleared house on like a standing up at the ball carrier pile kind of situation, just bowling ball pinned those things down. Really fun to watch it. Speaking of things that are fun, touchdowns are fun. And I don't want to act like I'm ungrateful for Houston scoring touchdowns because that wasn't a foregone conclusion a season ago. But we do need to talk about, did we get to see everything we needed to see out of this one. And so I want to talk about that in just 1 second. But first, today's show is brought to you by everybody's over at Upside, because if you're still paying full price for gas at this point, you're just doing it wrong. Like, Texas is a driving state. Houston's a driving city. If you're paying full price for gas, we got to help you out with the buddies over at Upside. Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play Store right now. Start earning cash at the pump today. Use promo code FOOTBALL. Get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year. And if you drive that big truck, I know it's a lot of money back in your pocket just from buying the gas that you already needed and used. At first, that was too good to be true. I got to be honest, like, there's no way this is that easy. It's really legit. It really works that easily, and it's nice to get money back in your pocket. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card, Amazon, and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app and use limited promo code FOOTBALL. Limited time promo code FOOTBALL for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL. Now, offers do vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here. And one question I think you got to ask in pro sports at the end of preseason games, but in college sports at the end of these games against FCS type opponents that you're supposed to win, did you get what you need out of it? Do you walk away as a Houston Cougar fan, supporter? Do you feel like you got what you need from that performance? Now, the offense was super vanilla. And I will, again, reiterate, they played this thing and all. It looked like a preseason game. You rotated running backs a lot, but you were missing Rashawn Sanford. Who knows what things look like with his wiggle there in the backfield? He's got a lot of juice that could have used, right? Offensive play calling was very vanilla. And they do typically say that in college football, the biggest jump is between weeks 1 and 2, because now they go to the film room tomorrow on Friday. They might get Friday off. Actually, we'll see what they say online about it. But go to the film room for the next practice. You've got game footage to break down, right? That's a big advantage in the growth and development of a football team, right? Now, with how vanilla they were and how little they put out there, Houston might really hit that growth spurt of sorts between weeks 2 and 3, Rice and Colorado. We'll see, right? But ultimately, what you're seeing here is Houston's got something to build on, something to work off of, and what felt like a preseason game on offense, right? Not pretty, a lot of mistakes, and not even mistakes that necessarily always jump out on the football field. I see here in the chat here, a couple of different people. James Clancy asked about Cozell. I said it earlier, but we have not seen anything yet. He was walking around fine, had the brace on, was walking around fine, and ultimately, I'd imagine they're going to be pretty tight-lipped about that until they get to a Big 12 game and have to tell us more. Jeffrey is not optimistic about tonight's game. See, first game issue to be worked out, but lots of struggle with the offensive line, bad offensive line technique. He continues standing up straight up, not playing with leverage, going to get killed by competent defenses. And then Yash comes in, follows in after that. He's not too worried about the offensive line. 4 new guys from positions, offensive zero chemistry together. They do need time. I will say one thing that stuck out that Jeffrey's correct about is the offensive line certainly looks a lot taller. Now, part of that is because they actually are taller, right? Evaselli, left tackle, 6'6", right tackle Dalton Merriman is legitimately 6'9" without his shoes on. Like, that is just going to look taller. But also there were plays I thought Dalton Merriman made at right tackle. He also got beat twice where he looked like he was not able to do the job at right tackle. Just 2 plays, but was 2 plays against an FCS opponent. So we'll see where things go. I'm sure film will be rough for him on those 2 plays. We'll see where the growth development goes with Iman Yagavi running it. I lean more into what Yash said here. Yash, I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong, but 4 new guys that have to play together. And there are also plays where Pancake Hunter was not in the game, and you actually had 5 new guys out there because they're kind of rotating there for a second. New offensive coordinator, new snap count and cadence. You saw that play into a couple things too. Offensive line did not look perfect. Not going to act like they did. I'm not trying to act like they did. But I don't know that I necessarily, I mean, I wanted perfection. I'm not going to lie to you, but I don't know that I necessarily expected it either. And it might not have been quite where I expected it to be. But on the whole, I don't know that as a group, they were horribly off target, right? Maybe not a bullseye, but horribly, not horribly off target. Were the SFA DBs good or the Cougs receivers just not that good? I honestly think that we saw a couple things here. One, they did not blitz a whole lot or send a whole lot. They were way more concerned about dropping guys into coverage, and they were kind of clouding a lot of stuff up. And so, frankly, I feel like they had a lot of guys in coverage for the 4 people Houston had running routes. And then I also think, for what it's worth, I mean, that is an FCS playoff team. I don't want to make them have to be like not good or whatever. But the same when we talk about chemistry, the offensive line, a high level offense will have the same kind of chemistry between the quarterback and receivers. They'll be saying, "Hey, I saw cover 2, so I did this. Oh, I saw cover 2 here, but I thought you were going to do that because or whatever, right? I thought you were going to break it off." That those kinds of things are also chemistry. First time with live bullets, so figuratively speak. And so I think that that's how that goes. Other people came in here with offense, came with a vanilla game plan. Don't want to show too much at the beginning of the season. I wonder if they do the same against Rice. That'll probably be a topic in next week's show. Spoiler alert. So we'll see how that goes. Yash with the lead, Yash. Yeah, I'm trying, man. I'm trying. I appreciate you tuning in, and I want to give you the respect. Everyone deserves to have their name pronounced correctly, even if I am not so great at it myself. So, Yash, thank you. Call me a hopeless optimistic, especially after having suffered through Bradbury's offense. But it seemed like UH played 75% just to get reps in and hammer things out. I think that's the case. I do think that if you ask Slade Nagel, offensive coordinator, in an honest moment, hey, what was your game plan like? He'd say, I wanted to see this. I wanted to see that. When they play Colorado, it'll be, I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that. And that's a subtle difference, but I think it's a really important difference in approaching a football game, right? These kinds of games, look, Corey Hogue told us all about how good Stephen F. Austin was relative to FCS opponents. I think they got a pro receiver. The guy on TV, Pete Souza, who is a really nice guy for what it's worth, but I think he's more of a basketball guy. Pete said that he thought they had a pro defensive back. I get it. If Houston had even played a close game tonight, we would be acting like the world's on fire, right? Like that's the kind of opponent it was. And so I do think they approached it as a practice, as a preseason game, as a work it through game. And frankly, that's the advantage of it, right? Is Houston has not played this type of FCS. They haven't played an FCS opponent since 2019. When they win the American, they spent a lot of their non-conference games playing Power 4 teams to kind of honestly earn their worth and be ready for the next potential realignment. And then they got that, right? They played UNLV last year before the quarterback quit on them, before the coaching staff changed over, and that it was a pretty good football team. They played Oklahoma last year, right? They played Oklahoma closer than Alabama did last year, for what it's worth. They haven't had these kinds of games in a while. And frankly, even in the 20 teens, they didn't have a lot of them. I think as fans, we're like trying to gauge what to take from this. And so did I get what I need out of this game? Honestly, I'd say like 80, 85% of it. Yeah. I'd love to see Kobe Young connect on a touchdown or two, or at least a deep shot, because I think that's the thing we're all expecting and anticipating and know he can do. And that's a part of this offense that we didn't see tonight. I would like to see Boogie catch a screen or two. Honestly, in the passing game, as much as Tanner Cozell was a big deal, they completed 16 passes. Cozell caught 8. But of the 16, you had 2 to Dean Connors out of the backfield, 1 to Jamarian Burnett out of the backfield, and 2 to Mekhi Muse that were the little like glorified reverses. Right, like they didn't hit a lot of passes, generally speaking, let alone to the deep guys, to Stephon Boogie Johnson, to Mekhi Muse, whatever, right? And so I think that that's a totally warranted problem to have. Now, do I think part of that's because they only completed 16 passes? They only threw, 24 of them. And honestly, they were getting 4 yards a pop running the ball. And why push it? Why push your luck? Sure, right? I totally understand that. Once you get up by a bunch of points, you're not going to do anything. I did say throughout the week, though, and I will reiterate again, I do think there was a value in pushing the buttons on this one and going over the top and doing that over and over again and trying to get 50. And I do think there was value in that in this game, just from a showing that you can, because it's been a while since Houston could. And I think that's important for people to know. But this is frankly just a different way to go about it. Again, I saw about 80 to 85% of what I need. I think Connor's got a lot of room to grow, but a lot of tools in his pocket. He still runs it. We didn't mention in the opening segment, if Connor had like ducked from hits and just tried to get the ball out of his hands and not get hit, it would have been very normal given his injury history, FCS opponent, the nature of the game, first game back from after getting injured last season. Like, it would have been totally understandable. And instead, his like fight or flight response was, let's run the face of the defense. Right? Like, that's kudos to that kid, man. That dude's a football player. I understand that he had problems at A&M and he played hurt and it didn't look great and all that, but like, sometimes kids are just football players. And I thought on Thursday night, Conner Weigman looked like a football player. I thought Tanner Gazelle looked like a football player. Mari Thomas looked like a football player. Kentrell Webb looked like a football player. Other new names across the defense, Zelmar Vader, Eddie Walls, Lofo, the guys looked like football players. And I think that's refreshing in a lot of ways. And frankly, I know that's a really low bar, but it's a program that's had a couple of lean years. And if we're going to kind of push back against that, that's really, really important. Last thing before I get out of here, I do feel like Rice is going to be a challenging opponent. But because of the nature of, American Athletic Conference opponent that you feel pretty confident about, I think you could see some more vanilla-ish stuff against them. The interesting thing will be what they do against Colorado, right? We're watching the Big 12 across college football right now, do a number of different things. I guess Cincinnati's probably not going to beat Nebraska, although it was like 6-3 at half or something crazy. Oh, it's a 3-point game, actually 5 minutes left. So maybe Cincinnati can pull that off. But like Oklahoma State, Tyler Martin, whatever, right? UCF was having troubles at Jacksonville State, but Houston didn't see them until much, much later. We'll see how those things finish up. But on the whole, you might not see a flavor besides vanilla until like week 5. And that's not a bad thing, but I think it's a thing you got to always understand as you're watching this team. Now, Colorado may prove me wrong and be worth playing a lot of other flavors, for lack of better metaphor. But we'll figure that out as we go. We'll be figuring things out here each and every day. This is going to be Friday's episode. Our buddy Michael Conner, who does Locked On all of the city of Houston, he did a postcast as well. He does the Astros. He does the Rockets. He's across all Houston channels. So he'll be in and out of this channel as well some. So he did another one. If you hadn't heard that yet, go check out what Mike says. He watches sports from that 350 or 10,000 foot angle, macro level, looking at things. So it's great to hear his perspective. Great to go check Michael out. We're doing Big 12 squads next week, and we're for Rice next week. Got some fun stuff on the docket in the very near future. And I'm working on getting some fun stuff in like the near immediate future. So we'll see how that goes. Locked On Coogs, proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. And man, oh man, it feels good to be 1-0. It's been a minute since we were 1-0. Go freaking Cougs.